Hello everyone, it's Linda from Linda Z's in Arlington Heights, Illinois, ready for a really fun Thursday morning or Thursday evening project for you. This is kind of a continuation of what we have done before. We have another YouTube video that we did on the Merry and Bright. It's one of the tile quilts where you do the quilting in the hoop. And those of you that haven't joined us before, this is the assembly part. And next week, we're actually going to do some technique with showing you the batting and the backing and the binding. But particularly today, I want to show you how we did the assembly of the blocks. If you remember last week, or if you want to look at that video, you'll see I used this 10 needle, and I did some of it on the wonderful Luminaire XP2 so that I could have two machines going at one time. And I know some of you do have more than one machine, so you would be able to do two embroideries at one time. But the other thing that I did, and I have this hoop back here that I wanted to show you. Unfortunately, I didn't have the fabric in it, but at least I can show you with a piece of black fabric. And what I did is I would put I'd line up my very first design right in the center, and then I would move it all the way as far as it would go to the left. So what my goal and my purpose is that I want to try and get 3 designs in the hoop. So what I would do, I would move it all the way to the end here. You can see right to here, because that's as far as it'll sew. And it doesn't matter if the seam allowance wouldn't meet in there, because I've got extra fabric on either end that the seam allowances could go to. So say the design went right to here. Then I take this little ruler, and if you haven't used these before, this is a little 2-inch. It's wonderful. It's one of the Good Measure rulers by Kay England, and Kay's going to actually be in our store this weekend, so we're pretty thrilled to have her. And what I would do is I would measure from the edge of the design, because the design is all these little blocks that I'm doing are all measured with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to show you why you need that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So say our design finished here and the 1/4 inch was here. I would just put a little marking with this little pin. Then I would take another 1/2 inch, and because these have got little lines going through them on perpendicular and horizontal, you can see the little circles, and I can get a totally accurate measurement where the next seam would go. Then I could do the next design, and I would do the same thing. I would put the seam here, that's where the end of the 1/2 inch would be, and then I would go and measure it again and see if that next piece would fit right into this space. That way I can get 3 different blocks in one hoop. Now that won't always work. If I can't do it, what I would do at that point, I would just take this out of the hoop, move it over to this side as far as I can go, and re-hoop it. And now I know I would have enough fabric. I've been testing this with a couple of our staff, and Jasmine, one of our young gals, who is really doing her first tile, and it's really kind of fun to see what she's doing. It's her first time. I said, Jasmine, how many of these did you do a lot? She has I think a Bernina, and I think she has this too, but she was doing it in her Bernina. And I said, so did you use your big mega hoop? She said, oh no, I just did 1 block at a time so that I could go ahead and get them. I wanted to practice, because since I haven't done a tile one before, and that's okay. That's really a great way for you to start, but it's nice to have the marking so that you know where you're going to be. Anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of a help. I'm going to put this away so you don't have to think about that anymore. And look at what is underneath. You can see that I have already finished the blocks. I don't know if you can get a good look at that. I finished them all down to here. Now, if you haven't printed out this yet, this way or this way? Okay, both ways it works. Okay, this is your most important thing. And I do have, before I put all these together, I put them on a whiteboard, and I marked all of the different squares. These are the individual squares that you can see. And the individual squares are really, really important that you have them marked so you know what number it is. And you can see on this one, this is the last of the 2. Actually, this isn't the last. This is 24 and 32, but whatever number it would be, you will be able to find exactly what you're going to do on this particular design. So if you are working with your pieces down here, you will look and see exactly which piece is here. Like, for instance, the 24 and 32 are down here. I'm going to move this back. It's like a little puzzle piece. That's what's really fun about this. And you can't make a mistake as long as you have the numbers put on here. And you can see on this particular one, this leaf is going to, this little fern leaf is going to come right over here. And this one is going to come right to the bottom of this one. And in order to know that, if you just mark these numbers before you sew them together, that way then you'll be able to get the right pieces within the right space. And it really does go very, very quickly. Now, what the important part of the assembly on this, and you do have these sheets that are really important to look at when you are doing any of these tile scenes, even the little Santa, which that's going to be my next one. I think he's great. And I think I might do one of these in the greens, although I just love the subtle colors and the golds and the silver. So it's up to you. It's your choice for threads. I buy the thread boxes if I like the colors, because I think that's a really economical way to do it. So I want to explain, this is all done. I've already put it together. And what you're going to do when you start to assemble this, you are going to take your two pieces and you're going to sew them together side by side. I've heard people saying they want to do it this way, and that's not the way you should do it. You want to make sure they're going side by side. That's the first seam that you're going to do. But I see, before I get into this, what do you see on this? I know I get kind of fussy with this, but if you have black fabric, what are you going to have all over your machine? If you have got, let me take this little sticker off. I just put Scotch tape on here, so it's real easy to clean and get off. And you could even use the Scotch tape if you wanted to, but if you've got one of these little rollers, it's really nice to do that. This fabric, black fabric, creates a lot of lint, and especially with the backing of the stabilizer, the tearaway is just wonderful. I don't know if you used this before. I have other tearaways that I use quite often on my garments, but on these tile scenes, I would absolutely use the information that they gave you in the book. This is the Ultra Clean and Tear. You need 2 rolls of it, and it's just fabulous. And the other thing that I love on this fabric is the, you can see on the outside edges of this is that woven fusible that they suggest for the tiles, because that's what's going to help to have it hang straight when you're finished with the project. And I will tell you, you really can get this done in a day. I mean, if you've never done one before, this is your very first tile scene, it is going to take you longer because you're probably, you know, not sure about certain things, but it goes real fast once you start working with it. Now, let me go over again what we're going to do. When you do these tiles, and it shows you on the assembly right here, you're going to sew the 2 together, and then we're going to, they did 2 on top of each other, but that's not the way we're going to do it. You're going to do the 2 together, and I'm going to do one right here for you, and then you're going to open it up, and I'm going to show you the pressing technique, because I really think this is important. If you saw the back of this, now look at the back of this, on the 2 sideways together, and see how nice and open and flat this is. And the reason that is like that is because of the pressing. Now, the reason that I want you to do these 4 blocks is because now you have the 4, this is a finished one, and once these are all finished, then you attach it to the row and go across. You don't do it this way, you do it the way I'm showing you. Okay, so now let's put these 2 blocks together, and do you notice something new on my machine? I think a couple of you have in here. First of all, I wouldn't be without these. This is your most important tool when you're doing this, and you really want to be careful. You see how this matches up? Let me bring it over here so you can see it. And if it doesn't, you'll have to fudge a little bit. You see how that's going to match? there and there. So I'm going to put it at the top. And then, and see how this goes right down. The black line, on mine it's the black line that you want to sew around to do your ½ inch. The top seam, it's going to be hard to see it because this is black. I always make black on the top. And the reason that I did the white woven and the white Ultra Tear and Clean is because, Clean and Tear, is because I wanted you to be able to see this when we're photographing it. But I will tell you, I did this, a lot of it at night. I mean, I did it pretty quickly. However, I found, and you could do something like this, which I think would be really nice. Get a colored bobbin and put a colored bobbin in there, and then you'll see exactly where that line is. Sometimes it's hard to see when you go through. If you look at this, do you see all of these little ferns? And there, how do you find the black line in there when you've got it on here and it's all black in the bobbin? Because I used not only a black thread on the top, and I used, when I sewed these together, I used the Metrazine 100 weight. It really is strong and it really is a good weight. And in the bobbin, I used the 100 weight. But you could use a colored bobbin, which I think would be a really nice thing to do because you'd be able to see it on the back side a little bit easier. Now, let me show you how we're going to do this because I always check to make sure. Now, there isn't much here to match up, but you can see here there was, and see the candles. See how there's matching up here? So you do want to check it as you're going through to make sure it's going to sew. And like I said, what is new? Anybody see anything here that's very unusual that you haven't seen before? Anybody? This is the brand new Brother walking foot. I'm the very first one to show it. I'm so excited about it. And I know you're probably saying, what in the world is exciting about a walking foot? This is something that every manufacturer, I think, is looking at right now. I've got the real wide open toe in here so I can see it very easily. But the key thing, and I'm going to do it for you so you can see, and see if I've got a foot control here that I can show you. I'll try to go a little slow so you can see what I'm doing. Now watch what I'm doing right now. See what's happening? And yes, I do have a walking foot on. And how can I be doing that? You know what I'm doing? I'm reversing the walking foot. That's almost unheard of. I'm going to get it out of here so you can see it. Okay. And when you're doing this, you see how I'm staying on the inside of the line. I want to make sure that it's not too close, but it's not too far away either. And now I'm going to go off, and you know, I'm going to cross stitch on some of these, but this is the bottom one, so I'm not. So I'm going to reverse it. Now, you would not do this on your regular quilting. This is totally different than your regular quilting. I'm going to cut my stitch, and I can see my seam was off a little bit here, but it's the last one, so it's not going to matter. Now, do you see how I've got that nice seam? This is the key part now. If we didn't have, and Nick, can you see this on here, or do you want me to go over here? Okay, because this is really one of the important things, that this little tool, and I know many of you have this already, this is fabulous. It's called, I didn't have this. I had one from my other vendor that had a longer point and a ball on it, but this has a small ball on one side, another, and it doesn't roll because it's got the straight edges on it, so it's not going to roll off. And it's called the Expert Point and Press Tool. And it's really for pressing. That's really what you want to do. And watch what I'm going to do here. Open up the seam, and I'm actually going to make sure you understand what I'm doing here, because this is not my regular quilting technique. When I do regular piecing and I'm doing quilting, I do not press and point on every single square.
You want to turn your iron on?
I will, because he knows how important this iron is going to be. Okay, let's see if it, oh, it already was on. So turn it back on. Now, I'm going to turn it back to this side, and maybe you can see it a little bit. Now I'm going to use the smaller point, and I'm actually going into the seam, and there's no thread in this particular one, but I want to show you, I want to show you this one. Look at how much thread there is in there. And do you see how smooth that is? Look up here. And you see that? How smooth that is. And that's because of this little ball. Now, when I'm doing the other side of the press, I use the real big ball because it will open it up real smoothly. Now, not everybody has a Laura Star, because the Laura Star will really make a difference when you're doing this, but I'm sure you all have good irons with good pressing, with good steam. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually bring it over here so you can see it. I'll just take the paper so it doesn't steam up my papers. And when you are pressing like this, remember I've done this before, we have all this great steam. I always usually put this straight up and do a couple of presses first, because that's how you know that no water will come out afterwards. And then what I'm doing, to see how I'm pointing that, and I'm doing it from the wrong side. Look at that seam. I mean, I just love this. It's just amazing what it will do. And then turn it over to this side, give it another little press, and you're all set and ready to go. So now what I'm going to do, this is the bottom part. The top part was already done. And what I'm going to do now is take this seam and clip these together. And then you will come up with the 4 squares that you do need for each one. So this entire quilt was done in this 4. Let me bring it up here a little easier for you to see. These 4 were done first. These 2 side to side, then these 2, then these 2 side to side, these 2. These 2 were put together from this seam. These 2 were put together from this seam, and then we flipped it over, and all 8 of them were put together with the center seam. So when this one is done, and I probably don't have to take the time to do everything here, but I would take this, and again, these clips, I want to show you how key these clips are. Now watch what I'm doing. You see where that clip is going? It's going, I don't know if you can get it real close in there. It's right to the edge of the seam. I start in the middle where the seam allowance is, because I want that to be totally perfect. And then I go to each end to make sure those are in good shape. Okay, and then let's go to the center. And the reason I'm putting these clips in like this is because then I can turn it to see if this is totally accurate. And when you are turning it, because remember that ball is going to be halfway into the seam, which I know is going to work. And this one, there's really not a lot to turn in here, but when you're doing these letters, there's a lot that you want to make sure that really edges in there. So now what I'm going to do, obviously, is take it over here. And again, I am going to put this. Now, I'm going to do something different that most of you have not seen before. There is a little thing, and Nick, I don't know if I have to get my camera over here. Should I do that to show it? I told him I was not going to do anything on the screen, but there is a little thing that looks like an oil can. That's what I call it. And when I touch it, can you see what happened here? Can you get that in there? Mm-hmm. You have a red and a green laser light. I can change it to red or green, whatever. I'm just going to leave it the way it is right now. And that laser is what I'm going to follow. I'm going to actually go ahead and start sewing, and I'm going to sew it right into, and if I want to, I can reverse, because again, this is this new magical, wonderful piece here. And you can see I'm following the green line, and it's going to go all the way down. And see how quiet this machine is? Now, the reason that line is so good, because look at all these little black lines in the bobbin here. It would be very difficult to see where my seam guide is if I didn't have that. I could put a seam guide on here and measure it that way, but I like to verbally look at it because of the fact, what if I haven't sewn it perfectly straight? And that's probably happened, I'm sure, to every one of us, right? At some time or another. All right, so now I'm going to, I didn't seam these, and we'll see if I can. Normally, I would always put those on for everyone, but since this is one of the last seams, we'll see if that worked out okay. And you can always do something that I'm sure and many of you have done if it doesn't work out, and I have it in here. This is something we all keep with us, right? A little seam ripper. All right, so let's turn it out here. Okay, look at it's perfect. Got the seams exactly, everything worked out fine. So now I'm going to take this back over here and I'm going to go ahead and take my press tool. I usually start in the center because this is a real good way to take this ball. See, that's where it's real thick, is right in here. And then you can take the small one and kind of poke. See, I'm doing that? You can just feel it. If there's a lot of threads, I use the bigger one. If there's not as many threads, like see in this area, I'm coming into bigger threads. So I'm going to go ahead and use the bigger ball. And then when I go in here, I can go to this. And the same way with over here. And what it's doing is it's going to keep this seam flat. Again, this is not a technique you would use when you're doing your regular piecing for your quilting. And then I take it on the top and I do the same thing. I go all the way around. And these lines that I am pressing on here are actually going to be my quilting lines that I'm going to be using when I'm finishing up the actual quilt. Now what do? I take it to the press board. I turn it on here and give it a spot of steam. And let's, again, I'm pressing, I'm not ironing. Look at that. I mean, it's just amazing how beautiful that seam turned out. And then turn it over. And I know people ask me all the time, oh my gosh, do you have metallic thread there? Isn't that going to melt the metallic thread? Well, you can see it doesn't. It's in perfect shape. And I have a little, well, I wanted to show you what was really important. I'm not going to actually do this for you, but we are going to even up the quilt when we're through, and we'll show you how we do that. But so this seam is all pressed. I want to make sure it's totally perfect here. If it isn't, I'll give it another shot of steam. Now, the next thing is to take this. You can see here now, remember, I have you want to get the right ones on here, because if you don't, this is the one, it is here. These are here because you've got your little wreath that's coming down there. And now all I'm going to do is take my clips again and go to the edge, and you want to match up your seam allowance perfectly. You want to get right in the center of that seam allowance. And again, I want to mention to you how this clip is going right to the edge of the seam allowance, which mine is in black, and it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Many of you I know, or a couple of you I know, have done the bobbin thread with a different color, which would make sense. I can see this pretty well, but with that laser I can really see it. So now what I can do again, and here's what I really want to watch, because these are the little wreaths, and I want to go over there, put that on again, and see it goes right up to the edge. So I can take this out, and you can see, no, I'm off just a slight smidgen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring that down a little bit, clip this back in here, and look at, perfect, absolutely perfect. And the same way with the other one. So you can see, uh-oh, anybody catch this? I know this could possibly happen to you, so I hope it's better that it happens to me and not to you. Look what's over here. There's a little feather. So what in the world happened? That feather should be over here. So what do I have to do? Take this out, these clips off, and I have to use what I talked to you about earlier. What? My seam ripper. Because this is perfect over here. See, this is going to go here. This has to be flipped over to this side because that little wreath was over there. And that's the reason you don't want to take these little numbers off till you are completely done. So it's my last one, so it's really not a bad one to do. But remember how important this diagram is. And that's why I kept putting these on here, so we would know what the number is. When you do take them off, You see that little half square? You see this little half circle? That has to go down here on this side. And so I'm going to take my seam ripper and rip this open, which will take a very short time. And then I'm going to flip them over and put them in the right arrangement. And then we will have our finished project. So now I have taken the seam ripper and ripped it out, and voila, finished and done in the right way. It's really wonderful to film in a warehouse with a video studio, because guess what I found? I went over there and asked them, I said, you know what? I'm almost finished my last block. And what did I do? I sewed it upside down. And I always have one of these. I don't carry it with me, and I should have. This is a little rubber tip. And look what happens. I don't know if you can see it here. See all those extra threads? It's black, but there's a lot of extra threads. And I go like this, and look at it. It's just brushing them right off. It's at the very bottom, so I don't have to worry about it. But I don't want those in there when I put my binding on and when I do the seaming. So boom, 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 boom. And every bit of it just comes right off. This is a wonderful tool. Then I'll take that with my pressing cloth and my pressing pad, go to the board and press it real good so it is nice and flat. And if I see any extra little threads at this point, what I'll do is I'll take this little piece. See, this is the seam ripper here. This is the little one right here. And this was the littler one is nice to get in here. Now all those threads are gone. So what we do to finish up, we're almost done now, we are going to take this piece and find your center. You're going to press this seam open, because I've already pressed these two together. This was the one that I had done incorrectly. Now I seamed it together on the side. So I'm going to take my little pressing tool again, go down the center, press it, turn it over, and then I'm going to take my clips and clip them all the way along, because this is one row, and then it will be finished. Now, next week, what I'm going to do is show you the rest of the assembly for your batting, and this is what I use. It's the embroidery batting by Floriani. It's just wonderful, real easy to put in, and it's just enough to put in a backing. This is my, I use the same on the back. I'm using this black fabric for the backing also, and I'm also going to use it for my binding. So I'm going to show you a technique on binding. I like to do hand binding, as most of you know. I do it by machine on one side and then flip it to the other side and do the hand binding. I might try a little something different for you, though. If I'm doing a placemat or something that gets washed a lot, then I will do machine binding. So maybe I'll try and show you a couple of little techniques. Now, don't forget about this wonderful walking foot. We are so lucky to have it. Do you know these have been on orders, back orders since August. We just got in a bunch. If you want to have a wonderful, if you're a brother owner, you want to go ahead and get one of these. And I have a feeling that some of the other companies will be coming out with these probably in the next couple years. But I'm going to do my quilting. I'm going to actually do it in the stitch in the ditch, as they call it, or with an edging where I'll go right down the center. And you can see it'll be very fast. It won't take a long time, and this whole piece will be done with the quilting, I'd say, in a couple hours. So I want to be able to show you, though, the process, so I won't finish everything. There is a finished one here that you can see. You see how nice and smooth that it hangs? I mean, it's just really beautiful. So don't forget this. I think I've shown you all of the little techniques. I know I made a mess here, but your sewing rooms are always kind of a messy place too, right? Until we get finished, and then we tidy up, and then it gets messy again. So have a wonderful day. I hope this gives you a good idea how important it is to put your numbers on so you don't have it upside down like I did. Enjoy the process. Try it. I think you'll really enjoy what's a little fun project with your tiles in the hoop and quilting with your machine. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you next week for batting, backing, and binding.